I admit they place too much emphasis on profit and their behaviour towards women is somewhat primitive. They're greedy, misogynistic, untrustworthy little trolls, and I wouldn't turn my back on one of them for a second. Neither would I, but once you accept that, you'll find they can be a lot of fun.
Hello there and welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd World Empire, and today we are discussing females, specifically Ferengi females, the fairer sex of the less than fair species. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe and comment down below. And moving on from that, little cold open there. What do we know about Ferengi females? Actually, a lot and very little, interestingly. Ferengi culture is one that is centered around the idolization of business culture. As I mentioned in a previous video, they are a corporatocracy. They are also deeply misogynistic and male dominated as a society. Women are restricted from most aspects of Ferengi culture. For example, the most important aspect of Ferengi culture is earning profit and improving yourself. Women are not allowed to do that. They are barred from all trade or commerce or earning money of any kind. They can't have a job, nothing. The only thing they're expected to do is to look after the house, look after their family, and basically play their role. They're not allowed to speak to anyone outside of their family without permission anyway, and even then it's still kind of frowned upon. So Ferengi women don't have the best lives. They're not allowed friends, they're not allowed to socialize. And again, most importantly, to a Ferengi, they are not allowed to earn profit, which is something that many Ferengi females find particularly grating, as it's almost like genetically hardwired into them to want to better themselves and earn money. Ferengi women, as I said, are not allowed to do this. If they are ever caught earning money, they are forced to sign a written confession admitting to the crime that they had committed and give back all the profit they earned. Now, if they refuse to do this and they're still found guilty of doing it, the money will be confiscated, they will be sold possibly into indentured servitude, which is basically slavery, and the men in the family will be held accountable for her actions and forced to pay it back. Usually this falls on the male that is considered most responsible for that female. If she's unmarried, this would be her father or oldest male relative, or possibly her son or somebody else. But basically, oldest male relative or husband is considered responsible for her. Now, this does extend also to them being responsible for her well-being as well. Mistreatment of females is also not permitted. The males are expected to look after the females, although Ferengi laws on protection for women's rights in their culture are practically non-existent. It's more just a cultural norm that the male would look after them, and they're expected to do so, as this would probably be written into the contract of marriage. In Ferengi culture, that is literal contract of marriage. This takes many different forms depending on negotiations of the different parties involved, but basically they sign a contract which is almost like a prenup, and it is also what they expect to gain from the marriage and what the wife's family or potential wife's family expect to gain from the marriage. What are they getting? They're getting paid to sell their daughter, but they may also be expecting a share of all profits earned by the family, whatever. They're also, of course, expecting them to look after their daughter, because if they don't, they'll lose that connection. There may be clauses put into the contract to account for such an event, such as her death or other such thing. Now, in other aspects of Ferengi culture, Ferengi females are not allowed to wear clothes, although interestingly, some Ferengi have more extreme views on this. They don't like seeing any female, Ferengi or alien, wearing clothes. They find it offensive and unusual. But the Ferengi like to deal with alien races, so they grow accustomed to females from other species wearing clothes and talking to them and negotiating. But when it comes to their own race, they can't even look at their own mother if she happens to be wearing clothes. It's like they need to naked. It's the equivalent of in humans, if you saw your mother naked and you'd avert your eyes. In Ferengi culture, if they see their mother dressed, it's like they can't look at her. It's peculiar from a human point of view, but it's simply the way their culture has developed and evolved. Biologically, of course, there are differences between a Ferengi female and a male. They live proportionally about as long. Biologically, they have the same differences you'd expect from a human male and human female, mostly in terms of their reproductive organs. But Ferengi females have a few other immediate visual differences between themselves and a Ferengi male. Although they are about the same average height, a Ferengi female is still a little shorter than the average male. Similar to the males, they are hairless. They have sharp, pointy teeth, but the most striking difference are their ears. Now, Ferengi have a thing with their ears, Umaks, where they like to have their ears basically caressed and tickled. This is because Ferengi ears are extremely sensitive and somewhat, possibly, an erogenous zone for the Ferengi. It's unknown if this is the same for the females, but if it is for the men, it probably is for the women. But the females' ears are far less developed than those of the men, the men's being much larger. In fact, in Ferengi culture, the size of your ears has somewhat akin to the myth amongst humans about your shoe size. So the bigger your ears, the bigger your profit you can give to your wife, is basically what we're talking about. Now, it is known that there are bones in the Ferengi ear, as it is also a thing where when you see a Ferengi skull, it still has ears. This is because the ears are much more integral with their biology. It's the same with the females. Also, there are surgeries that can be performed mostly off Ferenginar, as obviously interacting with females is limited by other Ferengi outside of their family, but lobe tightening or alteration is fairly common surgery, whereas lobe enlargement is very common amongst males to show off their manhood. It's kind of like how some animals have sort of like a peacock, put a big display out. So Ferengi having big ears, the bigger the better. Bigger is definitely better. Size matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. Now, the Ferengi female we encounter in the 24th century was trying to get out of this rut, but because of strict laws that prohibited them and many controlling males in their society, Ferengi females for a long time were not encountered off Ferenginar. Very few aliens ever having seen one. Even when you visit Ferenginar, because the women don't get out very much, they only leave the house when they're given permission to do so, or if there's an emergency, so the house is on fire, they don't generally leave it. They don't go to the market and buy things. They don't do anything like that. They may get taken out by their husbands, but in all probability most aliens won't see a Ferengi female when visiting Ferenginar. They may catch glimpses. That's it. They certainly wouldn't have spoken to one. But in the 24th century, many Ferengi females began to sneak off-world to earn profit. Disguising themselves as male was the most common way to do this. They would wear clothes, they'd strap down their breasts, and they'd put synthetic ears on, or perhaps go as far as to have surgery to make their ears larger to make them look more male. But eventually, the Grand Nagus Zek got involved with a Ferengi female who had a particularly good lobe for profit. She taught him a valuable lesson that the Ferengi females were an untapped market, and there was a great deal of potential in exploiting that market. And the Ferengi were being left behind with other societies, with their misogynistic, archaic attitudes towards females being an anchor that was holding back their society. Zek recognized this. Now, although his purposes may not have been truly altruistic, or he was genuinely thinking this is what I think is best for Ferengi women, he thought it was best for commercially Ferengi society, and certainly he thought it would improve the Ferengi's relations with other races. He also simply saw a massive domestic market he could exploit and sell things to. And this was all taught him by a single Ferengi female who refused to be naked and refused not to talk to anyone and began to covertly earn profit. Something she did extremely well and helped him become even wealthier. Something any Ferengi would appreciate. Particularly stubborn Ferengi males would still be resistant to such things, such as Quark's father, who had no lobes for profit but simply wouldn't listen to his wife when she tried to give him advice, because females. Some Ferengi males, however, were much more liberal and modern in their thinking towards females. This was mostly amongst Ferengi who spent time off Ferenginar, and particularly amongst those Ferengi who spent time with other races more extensively. Ferengi like Rom, who would go on to be the Nagus, took a non-Ferengi as his wife. A woman who was not going to be bound by Ferengi traditions, where she chews his food and she looks after him and etc, etc. Doesn't wear clothes, although, I'm sure she didn't really mind that one so much. But, all things considered, by the 2370s, the rights of women in Ferengi society were beginning to improve, reflecting changes that had taken place on Earth more than a millennia earlier. Although these Ferengi traditions were not likely to break anytime soon, there was certainly a glimpse of hope where the females were being allowed to travel off-world, they were finally being allowed to wear clothes, even make some independent choices, and most importantly, earn their own profit. Now it's likely they were going to see similar problems that were seen in early Earth when such changes took place, and they were painful and they were difficult and they were slow, such as non-equal wages, their rights still not being represented, etc, etc, etc. The Ferengi had all that loveliness to come. But the point was, the first baby steps had been taken in the liberation of Ferengi women and females in general in the eyes of the Ferengi male-dominated society and populace. As well as, again, this extended to improving the way the Ferengi could interact with other species, as many races looked down on Ferengi for these barbaric traditions, as many of them saw them, particularly amongst societies that had a more traditional matriarchal or strong female culture, like the Klingons. Although not strictly speaking matriarchal, certainly Klingon females were very strong-willed, and they were not remotely willing to put up with these nuisance, pathetic little Ferengi. This was again something that was hindering profit-making for the Ferengi, and making these changes was ultimately going to be a good thing for their society. They just needed to take those, as I said, first baby steps to get there. How long it was going to be before a Ferengi female was able to join Starfleet? Who knows? Centuries most likely, optimistically decades. But one day it could happen. There could be a Ferengi female daemon in command of one of their starships. All such things. Many Ferengi actually found it particularly something of a kink for a female to wear clothes, finding it very erotic to see a female fully dressed and covering up all of her skin. Again, this was a very polar opposite to the way many other races view the females of their species or others, wanting them more undressed and more seductive rather than just clothed. But aliens got to alien, right? And that is the Ferengi females. Of course, there are individual Ferengis of females of note, such as Pel and Ishtar, but I may do individual videos on those characters rather than treatment. This one, as a whole, the Ferengi female in Ferengi society were basically a subclass of Ferengi who were treated as little more than commodities and property by the more powerful male population of their society. They were raised to believe that this was simply the way things were. And it wasn't until there was the increased, more social interactions with other species that the Ferengi actually had their first cultural revolution in God knows how many millennia to realize that there was another way, and that more importantly, from a Ferengi point of view, again a massive untapped market of people to make profit and make profit off of. No longer would women simply be an item to sell, they were also someone to buy another item. And for the Ferengi, that was actually a really big step.
I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, please check out my social links in the description box below to Instagram and Twitter and others, and also is down there a link to my Patreon page where you can support this channel and the others as I try to grow this franchise and do this more regularly. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.